Radio talk show, The Hot Seat, Exclusive 7. It's a lovely Thursday morning, and welcome to Thursday's edition of the Hot Seat Radio show. I'm your host. My name is Peter Zulu, and this morning we are featuring a shorts for economic progress leader. Mr. Sean Tembo joins us on the show this morning. We're live on multiple platforms. We're live on Kwitu FM on 93.3 FM here in Lusaka, live on Canela FM on 97.7 FM in Lundazi, to be specific, in the Eastern Province. Anywhere else, you can catch us live on GSTV channel 912 and Go TV channel 301. For those of you that would like to stream us live, we're live on the Hot FM Facebook page. You can follow proceedings of the show. We're also live on the Radio Box, the TuneIn app, and Radio Garden. So for those of you that are watching us live on Facebook, if you've got any questions for Mr. Tembo from the conversation we're about to have, feel free to post those questions in the comment section. We'll put them forward a little later on the show for Mr. Tembo to respond to those questions. At this point in time, allow me to welcome my guests to the show this morning. Mr. Tembo, good morning and welcome to the Hot Seat.
Good morning, Peter. How have you been?
I've been okay. How have you been?
Very well. And of course, a very good morning to all the listeners and viewers out there.
All right, it's good to have you on this morning, Mr. Tembo, because there are a lot of things that have happened the past 2 days, I think, regarding the United Kwacha Alliance, which I don't know if you, because from your statement you said alleged expulsion. So I want to find out if you still maintain that you're a member of the United Kwacha Alliance or not. But you were expelled from the United Kwacha Alliance on Tuesday this week. How do you think this will impact your party's future, for starters, as far as collaborations are concerned with other opposition leaders?
Well, I'll start by answering your first question, Peter. There are two questions there. The issue of expulsion from UKA. If you read our statement, we made it very categorical that in as much as that expulsion was illegal and unprocedural, we are not going to contest it. Yes. The reason we're saying that expulsion was illegal and unprocedural is because of the manner it was conducted. As we clearly explained in our statement yesterday, the meeting that was convened in which our expulsion was resolved had no notice, and we were not made aware of it. It was a meeting that was convened after the main meeting had already been concluded. You understand? And our version of events was clearly corroborated by the Secretary General of UKA, who, by the way, also resigned because of that kangaroo way of doing things. But I must be very quick to mention, Peter, that, ever since we joined the United Kwacha Alliance, the way things have always been done has, to a large extent, been in a kangaroo kind of way. For instance, for some of us who come from a corporate world, we like to have an orderly way of doing things. And for instance, when you have a meeting, it is our expectation that the minutes of that meeting is clearly documented, the resolutions are clearly documented. If you are going to have rules, it is our expectation that those rules will be documented and will be in a form of a charter which everybody signs, so that if you have any conflict, you quickly refer to the rules and say, Rule 5.2 says ABCD. You understand that? It creates good order in that way. But from the word go, our colleagues in the United Kwacha Alliance resisted to document anything. So they made the rules as they went by. And even resolutions, you spend the whole day debating a particular issue, you resolve. A week later, someone will say, no, we didn't resolve. And there are no minutes to refer to. So you start debating and arguing another day, the whole day you are arguing and debating. So there was that strange way of doing business in UKA. Whether it was by design or by default, I can't really put a finger to it. But there was that strange way of doing things which I've never really experienced anywhere else. But that said, Peter, we have no desire of challenging our expulsion from the United Kwacha Alliance. When we went to join the alliance, we went there in good faith, because we believed that collaboration is the best way that we can redeem the Zambian people in terms of being able to offer a consolidated opposition in 2026, so that whatever comes in 2026, we can be able to excuse Mr. Hakainde Hichilema from office together with his UPND party, because they failed to run the affairs of that nation, of this nation. But we are not saying that we are not capable by ourselves. We are capable. What we wanted to ensure is just to see to it that it is a definite done deal in 2026. And a definite done deal can only come about if we as opposition are able to unite. But I must be able to, I must be quick to mention, Peter, as well, that from our standpoint, the decision by our colleagues to expel us does not completely close the door to possible future collaboration. That is why I've got nothing bad to say about my colleagues in the alliance, individually or collectively, because the need to remove the UPND government from office and President Hakainde Hichilema from the presidency is a greater need than any kind of squabbling, any kind of conflicts we might have as opposition. That is why, for me, the door remains open that in future, whether at a different platform, we will still be able to collaborate with our colleagues in the opposition, including those that we left behind in the United Party Alliance.
Mr. Tembo, I want to chip in there because you said for you the door is still open for you to collaborate with other political parties. This is not the first time you're joining an alliance and leaving at the end of the day. You were part of the UPND alliance before it was called the UPND alliance. Getting into the elections, you left that one. Then United Kwacha Alliance, and now there's this issue to do with the expulsion. You've been expelled. Can you provide some insight into the reasons advanced by the United Kwacha Alliance chairman for the expulsion of the opposition leaders, you inclusive? And do you believe that these reasons are justified?
Well, the main reason that was advanced by Chairman Sapeva Squatter State Council is that we belonged to other alliances. For instance, myself and Dr. Dan Pure were accused of belonging to the Tonse Alliance, and President Peter Sinkamba was accused of belonging to the People's Pact Alliance. You understand? Now, when you look at those reasons, just like we stated in our statement, they are not valid because even as we speak, President Sapeva Sikota is the chairman of the United Party Alliance, which is an alliance on its own, and he is, to the best of my knowledge, still the chairman of the Zambia We Want Alliance. So he belongs to two alliances. And even in the meeting that we had on Friday, we put forward that argument to say, look, we need to make a decision as an alliance if members are not allowed to belong to multiple alliances, then that rule needs to apply across the board. You cannot have a rule which applies to A, B, C, but not D. You understand? That's contradictory. But like I stated earlier, Peter, the manner Uka has been conducting its business has always been contradictory. For instance, when you look at the rules for someone to belong to the so-called Council of Presidents, someone must have stood as a presidential candidate in any election. You understand?
Yeah,
in the past. Now, when the time came to admit President Peter Sinkamba to the Council of Presidents, the other individuals, about 5 of them, objected to that, to his admission to the Council of Presidents, despite the fact that President Peter Sinkamba had met that requirement because he has been a presidential candidate before. And yet, when you look at the composition of the Council of Presidents, you realize that there are individuals in there who don't meet that criteria. They've never stood as a presidential candidate in Zambia in their lives ever. You understand? Individuals like President Jackson Siravwe, President Savoy Imboira, they've never stood as a presidential candidate. And yet we have a law. So on one hand, you are rejecting one person who qualifies while admitting individuals who don't qualify. And then even on the law of belonging to multiple alliances, I must state that for me, I'm not a member of the Tonse Alliance. If I'm approached, then I'll consider it. But I'm not a member of the Tonse Alliance. I've never, in fact, the first time I heard about the Tonse Alliance is when I was accused of belonging to the Tonse Alliance. I stated to say, for me, our doors remain open. If the Tonse Alliance approach us and we look at what they stand for, and it is something that we can affiliate with, then we are going to consider joining it. But I've never been a member of the Tonse Alliance, and we are yet to be approached by the Tonse Alliance.
There's another reason that was put forward for your exposure. I want to quote Mr. Scott. He said you were singled out because you are being disrespectful and undermining fellow council members.
You know,
Let's start with this.
When you talk about the issue of disrespect, Peter, the people in that council who are disrespectful are Savoy, Imboira, and Jackson Sir.
Why do you say so?
Because it's well documented. You know, these are individuals who have been disrespectful. The only time I had an altercation in one of the meetings at UCA is when President is with President Harikarawa, and it had to do with the language that he was using when debating a point, a submission that President Lungu had made. So I said, no, you can't be using such kind of language. You are referring to the former head of state, so use sober language. And on that basis, that's the only altercation we ever had in terms of myself in the UCA Council of Presidents meeting. I've never had any other altercation other than that one. And the strange thing about that is when I raised the point of order, in fact, it was President Dankule who raised the point of order regarding the language that was being used. And Chairman Sapewa Scott had to rule on that point of order. He ruled in favor of the language that was being used, that the language is okay, it is acceptable. I've always believed, Peter, that you don't need to use strong language for you to put across your point. If you put across your point in a sober manner, it is likely to have buy-in, as a matter of fact. So for me, I strongly objected to that, and I must admit that we had a near punch-up because of that, because it was totally unacceptable.
You had a near punch-up with who?
Anyway, let me not delve into those details any further because it's not progressive, but that's the bottom line. You must understand, Peter, that when you have these affiliations, whether it is an alliance or whatever the case, you go there, you are a president, maybe you are a president of GPZ, the way President Chagwa is, or president of Citizens First, the way Karawa is, or president of PEP, the way I am. But when you have that meeting, when you have that affiliation, you must not lose sight of the fact that some of the people that you are sitting on that table with are elderly people. They are people who qualify to be your father, even your grandfather. You understand? So you are looking at people like President Lungu. He's an elderly person. President Dan Pure, he is an elderly person. And even the last meeting we had on Saturday, the language that President Jackson Sirava was using towards Apostle Dan Pure was insulting language. And Apostle Dan Pure objected to that. He raised the point of order. And again, when Chairman Sagura Scott ruled on that point of order, he ruled that the language was okay. So I've never really understood why there is that appetite by the UCA chairman to tolerate unsavory language being used on elderly people by individuals who are younger. They might be party presidents, but they are much younger. You understand? And why, in his personal wisdom, he doesn't seem to realize that alternative language, more sober language, can be used, and the point still being driven across. And for the purposes of sanity in a meeting, it's very important that sober language is used. But every time our colleagues used strong language in the meetings, and we objected to that, the chairman always ruled in favor of that insulting language being acceptable. So it became very strange to me.
Early on, you singled out two people. You say Savoy and Savoy Mboela and Jackson Silava have been very disrespectful. And you said there was a near punch-up. Are we right to assume you almost had a near punch-up with the GOP president, Mr. Silava?
I've never had a direct confrontation with Silava. The only altercation I ever had in Oka was with Harikarawa. That's the only one.
Did you have a near punch-up with Mr. Kalawa?
And it was just on one occasion.
Did you have a near punch-up with Mr. Kalawa?
Yes, we did.
How was that resolved?
Tempers cooled down, and then we went on.
Is there any sort of future for this alliance, even when you're not part of it, from your experience?
Peter, if you are going to bring together individuals and say, let's work together as an alliance, the true value of that alliance lies in the synergy that will be created by coming together. That is the true value of any alliance. You must understand. And that synergy can only come about if you are pushing in the same direction. Okay. If you are pushing in the same direction, all of you, you create synergy and you'll be able to achieve what one person would not be able to achieve. But even if you come together as an alliance and you spend a lot of time fighting among yourselves, it means there's no synergy being created, because whereas others are pushing, others are pulling. You understand? It's the same thing as, you know, you have a car which has broken down and you are alone, you can't push it. You call 20 people to help you push the car. But out of those 20 people, 10 are pushing forward and another 10 are pushing backwards. It will be the same as you were alone, because the car will still not move. You understand? So, to answer your question, first of all, I must mention that in terms of the mindset and the vision to offer checks and balances and to be an alternative government, that aspect is absent, very much absent in OCA. There's no sense of urgency. There's no appetite to effect regime change in 2026. A good number of our colleagues in there, their position is that we should not be in a hurry to form government. Even 2031 is okay. You know, if there is anything that I fundamentally disagreed with, out of all the other things I might have been unhappy about, was that lack of agency among our fellow members in OCA to say we don't need to be in a hurry to effect regime change.
Who in particular is of that view?
You know the way OCA, I don't know whether to say is or was, I'd rather say was, because I can only authoritatively talk about what was there when I was there and what it might be today. There are basically two camps. Okay, there are basically two camps. Those camps, on one hand, you have the chairman, Sakura Scotta, you have Jackson Silava, you have Varikalava, you have Sharakateka, and you have Sawai Mboira. That is one camp. And then you have the other camp, which was basically myself, President Nawakwi, President Danpure, and President Lungu. And we shared a common perspective on our side in terms of the urgency, the fact that we needed to effect regime change in 2026, the issue of being able to identify a candidate so that we can have momentum and rally behind that candidate as we match up to 2026, and a whole lot of other things. We shared a common perspective, whereas our colleagues, on the other hand, shared a totally contrary perspective. They felt that we shouldn't be in a hurry in terms of forming government in 2026. We should focus on consolidating UCA, and that 2031 should be our target. Also, that we did not need to identify a presidential candidate now, and that even if we unveiled an UCA presidential candidate on the day of filing in of nominations, that would still be a good strategy. And their argument was that if we unveiled a candidate early, that candidate might be targeted by the UPND. But I always, felt that those excuses did not carry water, because I don't think there's any politician who is actually afraid of being targeted by the government. By the mere fact that you become an opposition leader, it means that you should be ready to be targeted by the government. And that strategy just didn't make sense to me, Peter.
But so the other camp were for that strategy. What was the other camp that you've identified as the camp you belong to? What was their opinion based off picking a presidential candidate?
That the sooner the better. The sooner the better we pick a candidate. And I must mention that that was one of the key points of departure in the entire alliance. That was a very big issue in the entire alliance, because we felt that once we identify our candidate, that candidate needed to be marketed. And I was basically telling my colleagues personally, I was very vocal about that issue. I was telling my colleagues to say, look, if you look at the people we are going to compete with in 2026, we are talking about competing with the UPND, and the UPND have their candidates. It is Hakainde Hichilema, that's their candidate. We are looking at competing with the Socialist Party, and the Socialist Party have their candidate. Fred Membe is their candidate. And then there is us, the United Party Alliance. We don't have a candidate. Even if people want to support us, whether materially, emotionally, or financially, they need to have a torchbearer for them to be able to pour in resources. Without a torchbearer, people will always have inertia in terms of being able to contribute to UCA. Even us, in terms of mobilizing on the ground, provided there is that procrastination to say who is going to be the torchbearer. Is it going to be President Lungu? Is it going to be Apostle Dan Pule? Is it going to be President Jackson Sirabwe? For as long as there is that procrastination, we are not going to be able to gain traction on the ground. And time is moving. And we need to have a sense of urgency because we are in the opposition. We are hoping to grab power from the ruling party. So we cannot afford to be sleeping until the last moment. We need to be on our toes. We need to be in a hurry. Whatever we do, we need to do it fast. That was my position.
All right, Mr. Tembo, based on that positions, you both had different opinions.
Yes.
But there are some concerns that, some members of the United Kwacha Alliance may be secretly working with the UPND. Do you know these people?
I can only suspect. I don't know for sure, but I can only suspect. And based on, the way Oka is, or Oka was, Peter, it operated in such a way that the moment you appear to be making progress, then someone, kind of pulls you down. They pull you back. You would have an issue. For instance, the issue of funding was a key issue, and we needed to address that. Okay, we needed to address that, and we came up with the initiatives that could help address the issue of funding. And we deliberated on that issue. We resolved. We made the resolution. And the time we were just about to start implementing, then people threw in spanners into that implementation. They raised objections which they didn't raise at the time we were deliberating and resolving the issue. So we had to go back to that resolution again, and we had to shelf that idea. So every time we appear to be making some progress in terms of gaining the momentum that is needed for you as an opposition to be able to defeat a ruling party, someone put us backwards. And if I were to narrow down, there were specifically 3 individuals who always, at a very critical time, who always worked to pull us backwards. And in my view, those individuals were pulling us backwards because of specific instructions that they received from the UPND to say, frustrate them in this way so that they are not able to make progress.
Who are these 3 individuals?
These are basically President Sirabwe, President Saboyi Mboera, and President Harikarawa.
So you suspect these people are
That's my suspicion.
Presidents
I suspect they are on the UPND payroll because of the way they were acting in the OCA meeting.
Did you confront them about this?
I did. Peter, for me, I've never hidden my views about issues. I table my issues on the table. I don't go behind someone and start gossiping and start saying, I think that. So I tabled that issue. I confronted them. I asked them, are you surrogates of the UPND? I confronted them. And they started raising side issues. They no, why are you asking such questions? This, that. But I challenged them. Are you surrogates of the UPND? Because of your behavior, you are acting like surrogates of the UPND. Because every time we come up with an OCA initiative, something that can take this alliance forward, 2 days later, you come back, you throw in spanners, and we are forced to reverse a resolution that took 2 days for us to arrive at. So your actions are designed in a manner to frustrate the progression of this alliance. And in my view, you are acting like surrogates of the UPND. I told them off in their face.
What was their defense to that accusation as to when you put that forward, that they're surrogates of the UPND?
To be honest, they never directly answered that question. They just went round and round. No, it's not fair for one president to be accusing another president on the council. This, that. But me, I tabled a very straightforward question. Are you surrogates of the UPND based on your actions? They never answered me in terms of that question, up to the time that they actually expelled me from the United Kwacha Alliance. And up to today, I feel strongly that these individuals are actually surrogates of the UPND, that they are on the UPND payroll, and that any progressive alliance that would involve them, they would still be able to frustrate that alliance. It is not in their best interest to have regime change in 2026. They are in cahoots with the ruling UPND party.
Because you're just joining us, we have PEP President, Petros for Economic Progress leader, Sean Tembo, joining us on the hot seat this morning. We're live on 87.7 here in Lusaka and surrounding areas. We're live on 93.3 FM in Lusaka surrounding areas. Also live in Eastern Province on 97.7 on Canela FM. Be sure to follow these proceedings. If you're watching us live on Facebook, well, throw in your questions. If you have any questions for Mr. Tembo, feel free to write them up and we'll be able to put them forward to Mr. Tembo on the show for him to respond to you. Now, when you state your statement, and you expressed willingness to return to the opposition alliance under certain conditions. Can you elaborate on what those conditions are and how do you see this impacting the broader opposition move? Because there were a lot of political parties that came together to form the United Kwacha Alliance. A lot of Zambians were waiting for the United Kwacha Alliance to get their house in order.
Indeed, Peter. For us, we are always going to have appetite to work with other alliances or other political parties in the form of electoral paths. And the reason is simple, Peter. Because if you ask me, I've got a very high appetite for regime change. And I know for sure that individually, as Sean Tembo, I might have the potential to remove President Hakainde Hichilema from office in 2026. But such a path would not guarantee the removal of President Hakainde Hichilema. You understand? I know I have the potential, but I know I have limitations as well. And I know that if me as Sean Tembo, I came together with another individual and another individual and another individual, the probability of being able to kick out President Hakainde Hichilema from office will be almost 100%. You understand? So it is about the appetite to ensure regime change in 2026. And if I was to mention, Peter, for me, I do not necessarily need to, benefit individually from any alliance or any electoral pact, provided I'm happy with the leader of that alliance. It is someone who would be progressive for this country. I'm happy with the way the alliance is structured. I would be very happy to support that alliance, even if I don't have any benefit whatsoever. Even if I'm not the presidential candidate, even if I'm not the running mate, even if I'm not going to be in the cabinet of that alliance, even if my party is not going to have any parliamentary or local government seats, provided that alliance will be able to remove the UPND from office, provided that alliance will form a better government than the current UPND government, I'll be ready and willing to support it. That is how selfless I am. I'll be ready and willing to support it. The United Kwacha Alliance, in my view, did not have the momentum, the zeal, the appetite, the hunger. When you are in opposition, you need to have hunger and appetite to remove the regime which is there. You can't treat the regime which is there as if they are your buddies. You are okay with it. You are not in a hurry to remove them. Then what are you doing in the opposition? In fact, at some point during one of the meetings of the United Kwacha Alliance, I challenged my fellow presidents to say, okay, if you tell me and you are arguing that we should not be in a hurry to effect regime change in 2026, then what are we doing here? What are we doing on this table? Why don't we disband and then reconstitute after the 2026 general election? Because evidently the majority seem to support the idea that we should not be in a hurry to effect regime change in 2026. So why should we exist now? Let us disband and reconstitute after 2026 so that we can focus on 2031. That was my challenge to them.
Mr. Tembo, you're saying you're very selfless and you look at these issues to do with alliances, make a decision on what's best for the country.
Indeed,
right?
indeed.
When you looked at the United Kwacha Alliance before you joined, who stood out for you as to think, okay, if I join this group, this particular individual can lead the nation in 2026, besides yourself, that is, can lead this nation and be selfless and can lead this nation to where you feel we should be? Because I say this, you had some choice words for President Edgar Lungu when he was president. You had some choice words for President Hakainde Hichilema when he was president. And before he was president, you are on record saying he would be, worse than the previous, than President Edgar Lungu. So when you saw that grouping of the United Kwacha Alliance, who stood up for you, who inspired you to say, listen, if I join these people are selfless people, and I want to be part of this alliance?
I'll tell you something, Peter. When I joined the United Kwacha Alliance, my preference for presidential candidate was President Edgar Lungu. And the reasons are simple. President Lungu ran the affairs of this country for 7 years. Okay. And in running the affairs of this country, of course, he scored some successes and he failed on certain issues. You understand? That's a common fact. Okay. And now we jumped ship to President Hakainde Hichilema. President Hakainde Hichilema has failed on all the things that President Edgar Lungu failed on. But in addition to that, President Hakainde Hichilema has proceeded to even fail on issues which President Edgar Lungu succeeded on.
I'd like you to give examples to that because we're going to get that challenge, obviously.
Okay, talk about the issue of contraction of debt. Okay, during President Edgar Lungu's administration, the issue of debt contraction was a big issue, a very big issue. You understand? You remember? Yes. And when you look at the contraction of debt, when PF came into power, or let me just start with President Lungu in 2015. 21st of January, when he came into power, take for instance domestic debt. Domestic debt, that is treasury bills and government bonds issued by Bank of Zambia on behalf of government. Our domestic debt was standing at about 20 billion kwacha when he came into office. By the time he was leaving on the 24th of August 2021, our domestic debt was about 89 billion kwacha. And these are figures which are readily available on the Bank of Zambia website. And the data on the Bank of Zambia website is very credible. I've been happy with their data so far. So there was an increment of 69 billion over a period of 7 years. Now, from the time that President Hakainde Hichilema took over office, in the last 3 years, our domestic debt has grown from 89 billion kwacha on the 24th of August 2021 to more than 245 billion kwacha as we speak today. That's an increase of close to 200 billion kwacha over a period of 3 years. Now, already when you compare the level of debt contraction, the debt contracted by President Hakainde Hichilema is far higher, more than about 3 times higher than the debt contracted by President Edgar Lungu. But when you look at the benefits, we saw the benefits in terms of infrastructure development under President Edgar Lungu. Even the face of Lusaka, even when you look outside Peter, you see the way the roads look nice, especially when you take an aerial photo. You see how Lusaka has changed the face. Now when my friends come and visit me from outside the country, I'm even proud to drive them around Lusaka compared to previously when the whole city was potholed, even highways were narrow roads. Now the face of Lusaka looks better. We have the new airport. We have this. We have that. So there was something that President Edgar Lungu was able to point at in terms of how he spent the money that he borrowed. Whereas on the other hand, President Hakainde Hichilema has borrowed more than 3 times compared to President Edgar Lungu, but there's nothing to point at. Maybe I'm biased, Peter. Maybe there is some infrastructure to point at, but as far as I'm concerned, there is no infrastructure to point at. So on any given day, let me just conclude. Okay. On any given day, Peter, President Edgar Lungu's presidency was far better than President Hakainde Hichilema's presidency. If I was to rate President Edgar Lungu's presidency versus President Hakainde Hichilema's presidency, I would give President Lungu maybe a 70%. And President Hichilema, I would give him maybe a 15%, and I would be stretching it. Otherwise, he deserves a 2 or 3%, but I'll leave it at 15%. That's okay. The bottom line, Peter, is that even when you look at issues like cadreism, you agree with me that the issue of cadreism was a big issue.
Yeah, it was a big issue, still a big issue.
Yes.
Before you move on to cadreism, on this issue to this infrastructure, because I have to ask you this, because I remember us having a conversation. You were on the hot seat with me after this bridge was commissioned, after I think 2 of the bridges were commissioned, and you criticized these developments. What has changed now?
So when you look at the nature of my criticism when these developments were being done, it was based on what I've always seen as short-term planning in the development of infrastructure in this country. You know, when you look at the infrastructure that KK was able to put up, he used to think 50, 100 years from now. You understand? Whereas the infrastructure that has been done in the recent past, people think 5, 10 years. So our criticism was based on the fact that instead of making these bridges dual carriageway, this dual carriageway will soon fill up with traffic and will be forced to expand to maybe 3 carriageway and 4 carriageway. Why don't we make these developments big enough in advance? You understand? And that applies to a lot of the roads that were done during the PF. My criticism was that, look, when you look at this critical road, it's a critical road. Why don't you make it dual carriageway or three carriageway, as opposed to making it a single carriageway, and then 2 years along the line, you start breaking it, making it a dual carriageway. That was the basis of my criticism. And that criticism still stands today. I've always felt that in our infrastructure development, we need to think 50 or 100 years from now, so that we do things and do them and forget about it, as opposed to going back to it. So that was the basis of my criticism. But unfortunately, under the President Hakainde Hichilema's government, there isn't even any infrastructure that I can criticize to say it is too short term. It is not long term enough, because there's nothing to look at. So that is the main difference between the shortcomings of President Edgar Lungu and the shortcomings of President Hakainde Hichilema. President Lungu's shortcomings, in retrospect, they appear like paradise when you compare them with President Hakainde Hichilema's shortcomings today.
Do you think you need to give him time, as in, because the major infrastructure that you might compare to President Edgar Lungu that he took pride in is the roads, of which the
airports and
airports and hospitals,
yes,
of which the UPND government also might say, listen, President Sean Temple, look at us. We've also kicked off the dual carriageway. Look at what our CDF is doing. We're building classroom blocks. And these issues that you need to tick for us when it comes to infrastructure as well.
Peter, me, I'm a very objective and fair person. And I would have been very willing to be patient in terms of economic development when it comes to President Hakainde Hichilema. I would have been very willing, except for one fact. How can we be patient about delivery of infrastructure when the government is contracting debt at a very fast pace, even compared to the previous administration? If under President Hakainde Hichilema there was zero contraction of debt and zero infrastructure, then we would be patient with them. We would think, okay, maybe they are still planning and maybe they are taking a bit of time to plan. It's okay. We'll live with that. But when you have a situation where you have 300% debt contraction and zero infrastructure, then we cannot be patient, Peter. We cannot be patient. We have to challenge President Hakainde Hichilema to say, sir, unfortunately, you are a failure because you are drowning this country into debt, but we have nothing to see for it.
I'm going to ask you this. Is it fair to say zero when you've seen the projects that are also underway under his regime?
There are no projects that I can point at to justify the 200 billion kwacha which they have contracted in 3 years. You know that when you put it in kwacha, it might sound like, okay, kwacha is not of much value. But even if you divided that 200 billion using the average rate of, say, 25, it gives you $8 billion, Peter. $8 billion. And where you spend $8 billion, Peter, pafunga paoneka, or uliku America, uliku Europe, pamene pangena $8 billion, pafunga paoneka. But all this money is being stolen by the UPND, by President Hakainde Hichilema and his surrogates, because you can't steal those big amounts without the blessings of the president. I know you're going to challenge me to say, where is the evidence that the UPND are stealing this money which they are borrowing? I'll give you a simple illustration. When you look at the Financial Intelligence Center Trends Report for 2022 and 2023, you'll be able to see that externalization, foreign financial flows have increased from about 29 billion to almost 40 billion in 2023. That is money being externalized out of the country illegally. Okay, according to the official Financial Intelligence Center Trends Report. Now, I'll ask you a question. Here in this country, the way the economy is, if we are told that from January to December, 40 billion kwacha was stolen from this country and the money externalized to the country, Peter, who could have stolen that money? It is not me, because I don't have that kind of money. It is not you, you don't have that kind of money. It is not the PF, because they spend a lot of time at court fighting fictitious court charges at the Magistrates Court. They are all blocked. We are all blocked. The only people who have money are the UPND, their ministers and their supporters. So if 40 billion kwacha is stolen from Zambia, as reported by the Financial Intelligence Center, the only people who have access to that money is President Hakainde Hichilema, his ministers, and his officials. They are the ones who are stealing that money, which is reported in the Financial Intelligence Center report. Unless you have an authoritative explanation, maybe we know your 40 billion.
Mr. Tembo, let's go back to the comparisons you were making. Let's go to categories. You are about to make a point there.
Yes. So, Peter, I was contrasting President Lungu's presidency and the President Hakainde Hichileman's presidency. And I was highlighting the key issues that we were unhappy with under President Lungu. The first one was the debt. The second one is cadreism. I wasn't happy with the cadreism. You weren't happy. Most Zambians were not happy with the cadreism. Okay. And now, the starting point is that cadreism was being perpetuated by private individuals. Okay. In the name of cadres who were wearing regalia of the ruling party and harassing citizens. Well and good. I'm sure President Lungu has learned his lessons, and if he was to be ushered back into office, I'm sure he would be more firm in controlling his party members as far as cadreism is concerned. But now, contrast it with the cadreism under President Hakainde Hichilema. The cadreism under President Hakainde Hichilema is not being perpetuated by individuals, private individuals wearing party regalia, no. The cadreism under President Hakainde Hichilema is being perpetrated by Zambia police officers wearing official uniforms while acting on behalf of the UPND party and carrying guns. Okay, take for instance, myself, I was attacked. I call it attacked because that was an attack by Zambia police officers from force headquarters. Then Joseph Kapasa, Blanche Pango, the chap called Isaac Ismwenda, of course being led by their boss, Alan Mukade. You understand? They came to my house with the grinders and hammers. Okay. They broke down my door, and those are aluminium doors. They broke down my door, entered the house, beat me up, bundled me in front of my children, and they left. My family started searching for me because they didn't know where they had taken me. They didn't even know whether those were robbers or police officers because none of them wore a police uniform. Only that for me, I identified them from previous arrests. By the way, I've been arrested about 9 times under President Hakainde Hichilema, 9 times over a period of 3 years. They took me, they blindfolded me, they took me. I was taken to some unknown place, further assaulted, and this is a matter which, by the way, I've reported to the International Criminal Court, and I've got a reference number, I've got a file, and every 2 to 3 months, the ICC gets back to me to say the matter is still active. They will come to Zambia at an appropriate time to come and investigate. It's just that they are overwhelmed at the moment with the issues in Ukraine and the issues in Gaza. They are overwhelmed with other reports. But my issue is an active matter which is at the International Criminal Court. I've got a file at the International Criminal Court. I was taken to the outskirts of Lusaka, further tortured and assaulted. I was stripped naked, and then the day later, I was taken to a police station called Bomoro Police Station in the outskirts of Lusaka and dumped there with very specific instructions to the officers who were there to say, do not allow him to use a phone, do not allow anyone to visit him. The whole reasoning behind all that, Peter, is that I should have been there for a prolonged period of time. You understand? Without anyone knowing. And in the meantime, my relatives were going from one police station to the other. They visited more than 50 police stations and police posts across Lusaka, even as far as Kanakantapa in Chongwe. My mother went there looking for me over a period of 2 days. And lucky enough, I was discovered at Bomoro. And I must mention that I was discovered by President Harikala. I'm very grateful to him having discovered me there. I'm very grateful. Despite whatever differences we had in Uka, I'm very grateful. And every now and then I do mention to him that, Mr. President, I'm very grateful for you discovering me at Bomoro Police Station. I was discovered 2 days later. You understand? So you have this cadreism which is being perpetrated by officers in police uniform. And that capitalism is not isolated. I'll give you just another quick example. We wanted to hold a rally this Saturday in Petauke, at Petauke Day Secondary School grounds. And we went to deliver a notice to hold a rally. And the inquiries referred us to the admin officer. The admin officer referred us to the officer in charge at Petauke police station. And the officer refused to get our notice. You understand? In terms of the Public Order Act, you are required to notify the police, and they refused to accept a notification, not to make a decision on it, no, but just to accept. Why? Because it's coming from the opposition. Why? Because the police, the Zambia police, at the moment, they are 100% cadres of the UPND party. And it's a pity that us, the citizens of this country, are paying their salaries. So on any given day, Peter, to answer your question, I would rather have a cadre who is harassing me and I'm not paying their salary than to have a cadre who is harassing me wearing a police uniform, and on top of harassing me, I'm also paying his salary. That is more painful. So to compare the cadreism which was there under President Lungu and the cadreism which is there under President Hakainde Hichilema, using officers that are affiliated to him, his personal relatives and friends, because I know for a fact that a good number of officers are directly related to the president. So they get a direct instruction from the president. Go and arrest Sean Tembo. Go and arrest
which
the
ones are
president.
those, Mr. Tembo? The ones you directly know
I know,
related to the president and are being given instructions by the president to do all these things that you are.
There might be others, but the one I know is Alan Mukale. I know that he's a cousin to the president, and he's a commissioner at Force Headquarters. I know that for a fact. Okay, he's a cousin to the president. So that is the reason why, Peter, when you are accused of anything, whether they accuse you of hate speech or sedition or any of the silly charges that they normally charge us the opposition with, it will not be ordinary officers from your station near you who will come and summon you and charge you. Because me, I live in Ngwerere. So if I commit an offense, why can't officers at Ngwerere summon me? I go to Ngwerere, they charge me and they handle the matter. Every time it's a political matter, it is officers from Force Headquarters, when a Branch Pango, when a Joseph Kapasa, when a Isaac Simwenda, who will come and kidnap you. You understand? They'll come and kidnap you. You know why? You know why they only use officers from Force Headquarters? It is because they want to use officers who get direct instructions from President Hakainde Hichilema, officers who are related to the president, officers where they can discharge illegal instructions, they can kidnap a citizen, they can keep you for 13 days without police bond or taking you to court, the way they did with those Gen Z protesters, Jason Mwanza, merely for holding a placard at the Freedom Statue, reminding the president, not insulting the president, not shouting at the president, reminding the president in a sober way to say, Mr. President, you said you reduce the cost of living, reduce the cost of living. You said you reduce fuel prices, reduce fuel prices. Just holding a placard. Jason Mwanza and his two colleagues were arrested, kept at Force Headquarters at Central Police there for 13 days. You understand? That is dictatorship. But I have a message for President Hakainde Hichilema. You, sir, you cannot harass us. You cannot harass us using your relatives at Force Headquarters there who you send to come and kidnap us. We are not going to allow you to kidnap us. And the reason is simple. It is because we are bona fide citizens of this country. We are not second-class citizens of Zambia. We are bona fide citizens of this country with the same rights as yourself, Mr. President. So we are not going to allow you to harass us. We are going to oppose you. We are going to challenge you until we remove you from office in 2026.
Mr. Tembo, before we open the phone lines, I'd like to get your opinion on this. We're currently, facing an energy crisis, the high cost of living, among other pressing issues for Zambians. What concrete steps would you propose to address these challenges? Let's start with the energy crisis. Right now, most neighborhoods, some are saying they're going 5 days without power, others are saying 3 days without power, others are getting power, once a week. Only 3 hours of that.
So there are two aspects in terms of addressing these challenges, Peter. There is the short-term measures that can be taken and the medium-term measures, as well as the long-term measures. I'll start with the long-term, then come to the medium-term, and then the short-term.
Okay.
The long-term measures, of course, we need to invest in alternative renewable energy. Okay, we've got an abundance of solar. We need to invest in that. But again, you need to have a government with the foresight and vision to think 50 years, 100 years from now, and not just a year or 2 years. Okay, that is the long-term solution. Medium-term solution is to ensure that come 2026, we remove the current UPND government from power because they don't have a vision for this country. They put their personal self-interest above the national interest. So medium solution to this problem is to remove the UPND in 2026. Whether at that time, me as Sean Tembo, I will be imprisoned or I will be available, the people of Zambia or whoever is going to remain behind after everybody else has been imprisoned should make sure that the UPND are removed from office and that we usher into office a responsible, competent, and visionary government. Those are the medium-term solutions. The short-term solutions, Peter, to the road shedding. You must understand that even in the midst of 96-hour load shedding, because like me, where I live, we have not had power since Sunday. So when you calculate the number of hours, and we tend to have power every 4 to 5 days. So you're talking about 96 hours or so. I don't know about where you live. Maybe you have power every day.
We have power every 4 days.
There you go. The answer. So in the midst of this very, very harsh load shedding, which, by the way, will soon, in my view, culminate into a health disaster. Because if the rains come with these levels of load shedding, people are not able to have water, we are going to have a catastrophic cholera outbreak. And I want the Zambian people to put me on record that I warned the UPND government that the trend we are going on right now of prolonged load shedding, we are creating for ourselves a very catastrophic health disaster. Okay, so in the midst of all this, Peter, the government is still exporting power to other countries. Okay, the government is still exporting power to other countries. Now, you might tell me, Peter, to say, no, but the Minister of Energy said they will reduce the exports by 100 megawatts. We don't need a reduction in the exports. We need a total ban in all exports so that as a minimum we can reduce the hours of load shedding. In my assessment and based on external reports from newspapers in Namibia, Botswana, and other countries where government is currently exporting power. For instance, there was a report in one of the papers in Namibia which indicated that about 48% of the power provided in the past 3 months was provided by Zambia. And their consumption is about, I would say, about 1,400 megawatts. So if they say about half of that was provided by Zambia, it means you are talking about close to 700 megawatts being exported. You understand? So why should we keep exporting power? Here they can lie, the minister can lie, but where they are exporting, people are honest, so they report these things. You understand? So me, when I'm looking for information on these things, I would rather monitor external newspapers and news outlets than to hear what the local Minister of Energy is going to say in a press briefing, because they always lie. They've got a high affinity to lie to the Zambian people, and they get that high affinity to lie from the president himself, from their boss. He has a high affinity to lie and lie and lie to the Zambian people. Last time he was addressing parliament, he was saying he's sympathizing with the people, that he doesn't sleep because of load shedding, but he's not doing anything about it. You are still exporting power, but you are saying you sympathize with the people. What kind of sympathizing with the people is that? So, in terms of the short-term measures, Peter, before we can even think about importing power, the first step is to cut all exports. In my view, if government was to cut all exports of power, we would be able to reduce the current load shedding to about maybe 10 to 12 hours a day, which would be reasonably acceptable. So that is the first step. The second step is to ensure that we import power. Now the question is, where would we import power from? Our neighbors here in Tanzania, about a month or two ago, made an announcement that they had to shut down about 4 or 5 power stations because they had the excess power on their grid. And the government said, no, actually, we are going to construct an interconnector to ensure that we import some power from Tanzania. But up to now, that project has not taken off the ground. Because an interconnector, if you are serious, you are merely putting up pylons. Before long, you connect to Tanzania over a shorter distance because we have power in Nakonde and Tanzania has power on their immediate town there. So that interconnector, you are looking at a distance of between 15 to 20 kilometers. It shouldn't take forever. Why isn't government prioritizing to construct that interconnector between Zambia and Tanzania so that we can be able to import the excess power that is there in Tanzania? It's a matter of common sense. So if I was president of this country now, those are some of the measures I would put in place.
Okay. All right. We'd like to get you involved in this conversation. We have Rapid President Mr. Sean Tembo joining us on the hot seat this morning.
You're listening to the hot seat on Hot FM 87.7. It's time for you to call now and get involved. Call now and get involved.
Well, President Tembo, I'll allow you to wear your headphones so that you're able to hear our callers as they call in. 0974-870-877, 0950-955-877. Good morning. You're through to the hot seat. Who do we have on the line? Hello, good morning. Oh, sorry. Yes. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, PZ. Good morning, Sean Tembo.
Good morning, sir.
Good. My name is Chela.
Good morning, Mr. Tuguta. Please go ahead with your question or contribution.
Yeah. Sean Tembo Mushan.
Ulifa wena wachera mushani. Maribu erapa ku Brazil, okay?
But I came last year.
Oh, you did?
Almost a year.
Oh, I didn't know.
Then you should stay a little with the news.
Indeed. Kind of road shedding,
started this year. Last year there was power, so you should have seen online.
Indeed.
Yeah. But anyway, for me, first of all, Sean Tembo times as a leader that was vying for a certain office like presidency and stuff like that. When I would follow your Facebook page, your language for a leader like you would say, attending, you would refer to a human being, to a man, things like that. So even when you are speaking things that would have sense, at times as citizens that are looking to say, okay, this guy may make sense, but when he speaks on his Facebook page, it differs from the non-Ghanaian. So you can say that, is it just the bitterness or is it just the what? And also for me, when you see a person that is part of an alliance with, there was a UPND alliance, I remember, before UPND formed government, that alliance left. Now the UKA alliance, you left, and you're no longer in the UKA alliance. So your in terms of your credibility, consistency, and what you believe in and stand for, you are kind of lost, like a headless chicken. Yeah. You have made some valid points, of course. I'm not arguing that, but you may have valid points, but I look at you in those angles. So, okay, this guy has no direction, because today you will say this about Lungu, and tomorrow you will say this about it. Tomorrow another person will come and you also say this and stuff like that. So where's your consistency? And also, if you look at, I'm going to talk about the issue of, the economy. Okay. One of the things also we are not looking at is, I'm not using this as an excuse, but also we should look at the global situation, right? I'm sure you are aware that there are countries in Europe that are in a recession and all those things. And for me, I would love to hear you also look at all those angles. And I agree with your short-term measure, the solar issues, and the next years. But also, you should also look at the fact that we had presidents before President Akande, for example.
Shall I ask you to conclude? We've given you enough time.
Yeah. Let me just conclude. Those presidents, why didn't they start those projects? And also, for the future leaders, I feel that when you come into power, don't stop what another person started. because you feel that they will take credit. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Tembo, I'll allow you to respond to those comments from
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'll start with this first comment regarding the Facebook
social media posting.
yes.
Yeah.
I must mention that when you go on Facebook and you search for the name Sean Tembo, do you know how many pages you're going to find? Not less than 100 pages. Understand? And the majority of those pages are actually created by our political opponents, and I don't have any control about the issues that they actually post on those pages. And we've filed multiple complaints to Zicta and this and that to say impersonation, but of course they never take any action. So when you see, especially if it is a screenshot, if you see a screenshot of a post which sounds very rudimentary, I would advise you to actually take a lot of caution. And if it is not a screenshot, if you are actually on Facebook itself, if you see a post and it appears again very rudimentary, I would advise you to scroll down that particular page. And if you don't see any post where I was personally live, because I go live quite often, and a live video, you can't post it somewhere else. It means that is an authentic page for Sean Tembo. So those are the precautions I would advise anybody who sees any controversial post. If it is a screenshot, take it with a lot of salt, a pinch of salt. If it is on Facebook itself, scroll down. If there is no live video, then forget about that page. It's a fake page. Coming to his other submission to say, in terms of the economy, a lot of economies in Europe are in recession. I think my friend Sharadekota should stick to taking pictures than trying to analyze the economy, because there is no connection between an economy in Europe which is in a recession and the Zambian economy where President Hakainde Hichilema has borrowed 200 billion in 3 years and there's nothing to point at. So my advice to my very good colleague here, Charatopota, is that he should stick to photography and not dwell in issues that he has no idea in. I understand that ever since he came from Brazil, government has not paid his gratuity, and I hope his efforts to call into programs like this one and make disparaging remarks is not in an effort to try and get his gratuity from government. Thank you.
He also highlighted you leaving alliances.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Does that make you?
Actually, to the contrary, it makes me a very principled person. It makes me a very principled person. Because as a man, you must have boundaries. You must be able to say, if you people cross this boundary, then I'm out. And for sure, if they cross the boundary, then you need to have the confidence and backbone to walk away. You need to have boundaries as a man. That is what defines a principled man. So, to the contrary, the fact that we are able to stand up to what we believe is wrong, in my view, lends credence to the fact that we are a very principled organization, and we are not shy to say what we see as being wrong. Under the Patriotic Front, we pointed out what we felt was wrong, and we did that with confidence, without any without diluting our words. We said it in no uncertain terms. Similarly, under the UPND, we are pointing out what we see as being wrong, and we are equally doing it in no uncertain terms.
Let's get more calls. It's 0974 870 877 0950 955 877. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning to you. What's your name?
Larry from
All right, Larry. Well, President Sean Tembo in studio. What's your question or contribution?
Yeah, my question and contribution is that Mr. Sean Tembo, let us try to be honest even as we speak and criticize the government. Because when look at a number of things that this government has done under the UPND, they are massive. They are massive things that we can point at. Massive, which you are very much aware. You are saying Mr. Kind has borrowed, but there's nothing to show off. And yet you've seen the recruitment, what's happening. The construction of the roads. Mr. Tembo, let's try to be realistic to get to the radio. Let's not confuse the Zambian people. We are all well aware. Let us make relevance even to get in the political space. rather than criticizing the government, condemning the government all the time. Mr. Sata provided relevance even as he was in politics. So let us, I think, take that part. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Your response to Larry.
Well, yeah, some of these questions, I find it boring to answer to them because they are self-explanatory. Someone can't really argue that the borrowing of 200 billion kwacha over 3 years is justified by recruitment of teachers. You must understand that in a budget, there are two aspects to a budget. You've got the operational part of the budget and you've got the developmental part of the budget. You understand? And we have other sources of income like taxation and LDCT. And those sources of income are supposed to adequately address our operational needs in the budget. You understand? So when you talk about teacher recruitment or payment of salaries of teachers, that is the operational budget. When a government borrows, it is borrowing because it is funding what it is calling the developmental budget in the national budget, which is infrastructure, capital expenditure. So when someone borrows 200 billion kwacha, which is developmental finance, and there is no capital projects to be seen, and the excuse is that it was used for recruitment of teachers, then that excuse does not hold water. And I must mention, Peter, that when you look at the statistics of the number of civil servants, you realize that, and you divide it per annum, you will realize that on average, between 2010 and 2011 and 2021, the Patriotic Front government actually hired in excess, that is both under SATA and under ECL, they hired in excess of 400,000 civil servants. So per annum, we are looking at about 40,000 civil servants. So when President Hakainde Hichilema hires, how many did he hire health workers? I don't know, 26,000. He hires this, he hires that. There's nothing out of the ordinary in that. It is just within the annual targets of government in terms of hiring of civil servants that has been there during the PF government, even during the MMD government. That is the annual target of government hiring civil servants. The only difference now is that there's a lot of publicity that the UPND government attaches to the hiring of civil servants so that they can be seen to be working. And the reason why the PF government and the MMD government never used to announce the hiring of civil servants, even though the numbers are comparable per annum, is because the PF government and the MMD government had the other tangible projects to point at for them to be seen to be working. They had infrastructure to point at. So when they looked at a hiring of civil servants, they saw that as a petty activity which wasn't worth over publicizing. So the fact that the UPND are over publicizing a routine activity such as the hiring of civil servants actually is evidence of the dismal failure and dismal performance of the UPND government.
Give us a call at 0974-870-877, 0950-955-877. Good morning.
Good morning, Casey.
Morning to you. What's your name?
Lazarus on the line.
All right, Lazarus, we have President Sean Tembo in studio.
Good morning, President Edgar.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
Very well. How are you yourself?
We are trying. Well, we are suffering.
Indeed.
Yeah. Let me just say, President Sean Tembo, you are saying things that you are not sugarcoating anything. I think if we are to call a state, this government has failed in all aspects. If we look at what we were promised, especially us as youth, because we voted in masses, because we were hearing what the president was telling us that you come and do. But if you check almost each and every sector, it's in disarray. If you check his performance against his promises, it doesn't even come near to anything that was put forward to us. So I have one word for President HK. We are not talking, we are fearing his scandal. And I promise him one thing. We'll talk in the ballot. We seem to be, we seem to be docile. We seem to be not talking or maybe taking any action. We are hearing the cadres in form of the police. But what he has to understand is 2026 is not far from now. As youths will also come out in large numbers and take him out. I think this is my submission.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Temple.
Indeed. I just wanted to agree specifically on the submission that this government has failed across all aspects. You know, Peter, uh, you cannot have a perfect government. Of course, each government that will come, not only in Zambia but in other countries as well, they will have this, weakness. They will have that weakness. But the bottom line is that a government should be able to deliver on the majority of what they commit to do. You understand? So the performance, if the performance is say 80%, 90%, that is acceptable. We are not saying that the UPND should have been perfect. But when you look at this government, they have failed across the board. Across the board. Even basic things like ensuring that athletes are paid, ensuring that before the Zambia national football team goes into camp, they are paid their outstanding arrears. They go into camp and they are complaining about their arrears, and you expect them to win games. Basic things. Even in the people who went to the Olympics, ensuring that you pay them. We've got some Congo who went to compete in that Diamond League, and he's complaining. He's writing long articles about it. He's not being paid. And you've got people in Akawana playing politics. No, some Congo is some. Just pay the guy. If the guy has been paid, you think he would be writing those long articles? This is a person who is also serving in the Zambia National Service. He's a disciplined officer. So why would we go about lying? He's not a politician. Why would he lie about not being paid? And you, Kawana, now, you want to politicize the issue. You want to challenge the guy because you know he cannot have as much access to the media as you do have yourself as peers. Let's not work like that. Let us do things in a honorable manner. So UPND has failed across the board, whether it is agriculture, energy, cadarism, just mention it. They have failed 100%. There's no question about that. And come 2026, the Zambian people will do the honorable thing. Just like we have removed governments which we have not been happy about, there is no exception to this government. So President Hakainde Hichilema should begin to pack his bags, and his ministers should ensure that they do the correct things, because whatever they are doing, whatever illegal things are being done now, those things will be investigated and the people responsible will be brought to book.
Let's pick up more calls. 0974-7077, 0950-955-877. Good morning. Good, how are you doing? What's your name?
My name is the brain, Chagwa, Wanawasa, all those guys who have been there before. Kaunda laid the foundation for us. Look, up to now we still have Canada. Northern province there, we have the Kasanda Chimba Falls. Mbala, that's far end, we have the Kalambo. What are we doing with those waters? So the problem we have, we don't use, we are just very good at using. Even you, if you were to be the president today, I can tell you, I can assure you, you will just continue eating what Kaunda left for us. That's the problem we have. Look at the young ones. Today I was watching one, I don't know, I think it's one of the rural areas where they were generating power, tapping a phone, and someone said, that's how there's no one else, the solution of Zambia is not outside Zambia. The solution is within Zambia. We had those young boys, jets. What are we doing about that? Because that's power they were generating. Why can't we call them? Can you give us your ideas? And we call the engineers, those who are going to school. Those guys are born with that mind. What they need is someone who is able to say, this is big. But because of that jealousy we have, we don't want to see a Zambian innovating something. We don't want to see a Zambian say, oh, it was made by this and this. We don't want to say that Zambia, that amount of money. That's the same thing which we did with Chagwa. We killed our own. So that's jealous. So that's where we start jealous. And I wonder, we politicians, which will be balanced. You also could even say, forgive me. Yeah, and you're doing one and the same thing. So let's change, let's have that. We were laughing at the people of Southern Province. People are okay. But look, we have been hammered. The whole country now is suffering because of Southern Province. Take a look at it. We don't have power because of Southern Province.
John, I've given you enough time to get your point across. Please conclude.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Tembo, please continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to agree to a large extent to the submissions by Mr. John, but I have one point of departure in the sense that he was saying we cannot blame the UPND government for the ongoing load shedding. I'd like to disagree strongly on that issue because the UPND, if they were a competent government, of course, they might not have prevented load shedding from happening. Load shedding would still have happened because of the issue of the drought, but it would not have been as severe as it is today. That is my submission. And the reasons are simple. The reason why we have this very protracted load shedding, Peter, if you allow me to explain, is because of two issues. You must remember that at the time that the PF were leaving office in 2021, we were generating about 3,100 megawatts of electricity. And our total consumption at peak hour has averaged about 2,300 megawatts. Okay, so we had an excess of about 800 megawatts, okay, which we were able to export. Even under the PF, we used to export power, but we were exporting excess production. Okay. Now the question is, why were we producing so much power under the PF? It is because most of the power was being produced by what are referred to as independent power producers. Producers such as Mamba Collieries, producers such as Indora Energy, producers such as Rusepa Power. So there was a mushrooming of independent power producers under the PF because of the policies, number one, that the PF put in place, and number two, because they were able to pay these people on time. You must remember that these are private companies. So when they produce and feed into the grid, they need to be paid in a reasonable period of time. And what the UPND did when they came into office in 2021 is, number one, they started reviewing all these independent power producers. And for one reason or the other, almost 80% of independent power producers, they kind of canceled the contracts. Okay, they canceled the contracts. And their belief was that these independent power producers, in their minds, they were affiliated to the PF. So they wanted to ensure that all possible sources of income for the PF are cut off. So they canceled contracts with these independent power producers. And then our total production in terms of electricity as a nation dwindled from about 3,100 to about 2,400. So we had very little excess power. And then almost at the same time, we then began to have situations where the remaining independent power producers were not being paid. So I'm sure you remember when the Mamba Collieries had to totally shut down production because they were not being paid. So that further reduced our total output of electricity. And then by the time the drought came, Peter, the bottom line is that we were having very little power to export. And then when they signed new export agreements, the second mistake that the UPND made is that those export agreements, they made them unconditional, meaning that power had to be exported whether you have excess or you don't. You understand? The contracts that were signed under the PF were conditional on having excess, meaning that the moment you have a problem at Kariba or anywhere else, you will then cut exports because you need to satisfy local consumption. But the contracts signed by the UPND were unconditional. That is the reason why, even now, in the middle of 96-hour load shedding, we are still exporting electricity because those contracts were unconditional. Now,
Which contracts were terminated from the independent power producers that you've highlighted right
several. So I can give you a list. If I check on my phone, I can give you a list.
Please share with us that, because we need to know which ones were
a lot of them
were terminated.
A lot of them. More than 5 independent power producers were terminated, including Lusempo Power and Ndola Energy. They were terminated. Okay, and it was only after load shedding came about that the government then started reaching out to these independent power producers and telling them to sign new contracts. If you search online, search for Ndola Energy or Lusempo Power, you will find that the government was announcing to say Ndola Energy will begin to produce 40 megawatts. That announcement was made about 4 or 5 months ago in the middle of load shedding. Those people were on board a long time ago. They were forced to shut down because ZESCO could not buy their power and they couldn't sell it to anybody else. You understand? So that policy of targeting these independent power producers because they were perceiving them in a certain light is what killed the innovation. Right now, there's very little appetite in the private sector to engage in independent power production, except for those who feel affiliated to the UPND government. But in terms of an independent business person, because the risk is very high, you produce power, you are perceived to align to a certain party, and then they say, we can't buy your power. You understand? And then you are stuck with the power. What do you do with it? So that bad policy is what has actually made this load shedding to be as worse as it is. They are not saying that there would not have been load shedding. Load shedding would have been there, but it would have been reasonable load shedding. Maybe 4 hours, maybe 6 hours. But now we are having more than 90 hours of load shedding because of the poor policies of the UPND government.
Mr. Tembo, our time is up. I'd like to thank you very much for coming through to the hot.
Thank you, Peter. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you to everybody of you that called in and asked your questions. This is where we come to the end of the hot seat for Thursday. We'll be back with another edition of the hot seat on Tuesday next week with my colleague, Hope Shala. Until then, it's goodbye for now. Do enjoy the urban vibe with.
That was